Milsom and Mark Shaw. Well done, video games. You killed Pinball.
Hello, my name is Ben Milsom. I'm an associate producer at Mind Candy, and we practice this. Imagine we'd have two microphones.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Shaw, and I'm a web developer currently working at the British Museum, where we take video games very seriously indeed.
We're here because a murder has happened.
Actually, sorry, you call it a murder. It was more of a slow death. This subject had an amazing life, a fruitful, colourful life. It did so much and it achieved so much, and we're just kind of sad that we discovered it kind of after it had died.
Oh no. Cool. So the victim we're talking about has had an incredible lifetime. It's been around for centuries. For a good 40 years, it's completely illegal throughout the United States. And it's existed from a purely mechanical form all the way up to a purely software form in between electronics and some other fascinating bits.
Of course, we're here to talk about Windows Phone. We're not talking about Windows Phone, we're talking about pinball, aren't we, Ben?
Yeah, indeed. So in kind of 15 minutes that we got left, are you alright? You're going to hold it the whole time? Should we step? Okay. Don't touch this. So in the 14 minutes we've got left, we're going to just really quickly talk about how we discovered pinball, which we did really late in the day, and the wonder that we felt about it. We're going to touch on some of the really interesting points of history that has to do, presumably some of them won't know, but brand new and incredibly interesting. But essentially, it's all about a game where you're fighting against gravity with nothing but a plastic pair of flippers.
Yeah, and it's actually quite a personal story because it's about how kind of two self-proclaimed game lovers fell in love with a dying entertainment, only to realise subsequently that it was video games that had caused the dying.
We met about 5 years ago when we both worked at BBC Worldwide, which is the commercial arm of the BBC. So they make products, DVDs, they sell BBC channels in other countries, the Stig shampoo, the Stig flannels, the Stig pyjamas, the Stig dressing gowns, and everything like that. Loads of kind of really exotic, interesting licensed products.
Frozen Planet pants, something like that.
Yeah, Frozen Planet pants. But there was one thing in particular they made, which we need this to work for, which was incredibly formative, and it's the reason we're here. We've done that bit. This was Bally's 1992 Doctor Who pinball.
This thing for us came out of nowhere. We were working in this big BBC building, and one day we noticed that in the corner there was this beast of a machine, this 20-year-old machine. It had dust on it. Nobody had used it for so long. And we were kind of drawn to it from our individual corners of the building, and we found ourselves there, excited by this beast. And we decided to play it. I don't think we'd ever played pinball before, had we?
No, I think I played it maybe once in one of my dad's friends' man sheds.
I think I played it at Quasar or something once. And we decided to have a go. And we thought, let's do it. And one thing we realised when we were confronted with it is this thing was set to free play. And when you are in front of a pinball machine set to free play, that is when shit gets real.
But Mark, why was it even that good?
Why? Oh, I'm really glad you asked me that question. It's because of the time expander.
In Bally's high-speed action-adventure game Doctor Who, the time expander makes its debut. On the first level, it is even with the playfield. As it rises to the second level, it exposes the control buttons. But beware, the Daleks are massing at the third level, ready to lead Doctor Who to his extermination.
We can see the time expander here launching the balls.
was just incredible. We've never seen anything like it before. The purely kind of mechanical and physical and clunkiness of this is symbolic of the entire experience with pinball. When you couldn't put it before, sorry, it's just so...
It's kind of just the way that chassis rises up to justice, revealing the Daleks that you have to destroy with the balls.
Yeah. And yeah, like I was saying, it's this physical thing. We have never really experienced gaming like this before. And kind of standing there with your feet planted on either side as you're nudging these buttons and you're controlling this huge giant box. We didn't really know at first that you're allowed to smash this thing around and get the ball moving.
We were there every lunch hour, or actually maybe during work, now that I think of it, playing on this pinball machine, and people started coming over and asking us what we were doing, and we told them we're playing pinball, join in. And they joined in, and we suddenly, without meaning to, created a pinball club at the BBC. And people came from miles. No, they came from upstairs, didn't they? And we kind of, we were downloading guides to score. We were downloading walkthroughs for this machine. And the more we realised, the more we learned about the scoring system, the more we realised that pinball machines have stories. That each pinball machine has a narrative.
Yeah, true. In the Dot 2 game, you're literally collecting the 7 Doctors. This was 1992, so there's only 7 at the time. You collect all of them, combine all their powers, shove them in the TARDIS, and then fight Davros and the Daleks. And like I was saying, we completely fell in love with this. And we got to the point where the floor manager, who manages the floor, he gave us the key. He gave me the key to the Doctor Who pinball machine. So essentially, I became head of pinball at the BBC.
Yeah. I was the assistant head of pinball at the BBC.
Assistant to the head.
Right. We also realised that actually it's fine to get physical with a pinball machine. It's okay to nudge. Nudging is okay. It says it right there. You're supposed to nudge, and you're supposed to avoid the tilt, and you have to stop the balls from going down, and that's kind of what it's all about, really.
Yeah, it's that physicality that we keep coming back to. This idea that the machine itself, with this huge hollow box, has a subwoofer in it. The bass is bumping in your chest. It just felt like nothing compared to using a little tiny video game controller. And we fell in love.
We needed more. It wasn't enough. We realised there was a world outside of the BBC, actually, and outside of the Doctor Who pinball machine. And the more we looked into pinball, the more we realised a really dark truth.
Video games killed pinball. History of pinball. There is so much history of pinball. We're not going to have time to even get through it, so we've tried to do some really horrible slides that go through very, very quickly. 1750, Japanese billiards was invented. It was invented by the French, had nothing to do with the Japanese at all. It was essentially looked quite like the pinball tables as they are now, with a plunger, which they used all the way back then. It would shoot the ball up, and it would bounce, ricochet along pins and fall into these scoring things. The pins that were in that, which are essentially nails shoved up in the table, is where the term pinball comes from.
What happened next? In the 30s, Gottlieb created Baffle Ball. There's a kind of very simple-looking pinball machine there. This was before flippers came about, but you can see where it was going. And Ballyhoo, again by Bally, and all these companies that made pinball were based in Chicago, and I think Chicago still is kind of the spiritual home of pinball, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 30s was the beginning of the golden age of the penny arcade and coin-operated gaming. Into the 40s, electronics was introduced. This is Contact, which is featured here, which is a Williams game, off of which Williams was established. The same as Stern. These names that we're saying you may not recognise, these are the real big pillars of the industry. And then flippers, fascinatingly, didn't end up appear in the form that we know them until Contact here, I think. Oh, no, sorry, not to that. Another game called something else. Until the 1950s, so literally 200 years after Japanese billiards before we got to the flippers that we know and love today.
And in the 40s, in the States, pinball was made illegal for 36 years because it was considered gambling. Because you can win things from it at the time, and you could exchange your prizes for money. So gangsters started controlling machines, and it got crazy. Shit got crazy. They banned it for 36 years, I think. And the mayor of New York said, famously,
pinball is a racket dominated by interests heavily tainted with criminality, which robs the pockets of school children in the form of nickels and dimes. There's something really interesting there in the parallel between the headlines now and in-app transactions and these microtransactions, which we're not going to have time to go into, but it's just fascinating. This was like 1930 or 42 when he said this. An interesting parallel.
Yeah. These are the big players, just quickly. A bit of Williams there, there's Gottlieb, there's Stern, Pinball, Bally, and Sega were knocking out pinball machines. I think maybe they still are up to recently. But they were the big players, and they were the big players pretty much until the mid-90s, and something happened. 70s.
Towards the end of the 70s and the very early 80s, yeah, another form of entertainment came onto the scene. This isn't really accurate, I just like this slide. Arcade video games arrived, and they offered much bigger profits to the arcade owners. They were way cheaper, they were smaller, they didn't require calibration. You could stack more of them up in a row, and they kind of just started to dominate the arcade space. This is particularly in America, where the arcade scene is a cultural milestone. So pinball was still around during the 80s, but more and more it was losing ground to video games. It just wasn't as attractive as it used to be.
But in the mid-90s, they had another chance because the manufacturers realised they could use film licenses and make them, people think they were cool. There's a Indiana Jones one up there. You had a favourite 90s license?
Demolition Man. Demolition Man's awesome. The Demolition Man pinball table literally has the plucked out eyeball on a biro or on a scalpel from the film as a prop in the game that spins around. It's awesome.
Things were great in the 90s. These are the machines that you still see if you go to, Rollerball or wherever they're in the corner. It's these 90s machines.
Yeah, fortunately, pinball was dealt another blow by the video game industry in the form of the PlayStation, which was arguably the point where home console became ubiquitous, that word, with a much wider audience. Where am I going with this? Yeah, so people didn't need to go to arcades anymore. They could play video games and have fun at home with their friends. When the arcade died, video games moved into the home, but there was nowhere for pinball to go.
And Williams, the manufacturer, decided, let's make the ultimate pinball machine. Let's get together every pinball mastermind that exists, the best designer, the best technical engineer, the veterans of pinball, and they got together to make a hybrid. They had to go this route of video games meets pinball, and it was called Pinball 2000, and it looked to be awesome.
Pinball 2000 failed horribly for Williams and eventually led to them closing down. Sadly, the second Pinball 2000 game that existed was based on Phantom Menace, which you could argue was, and it featured Jar Jar quite heavily, I think, which is probably not a good idea. It stripped all the personality out of what before had been this incredibly physical game. No longer were you shooting your ball up and around these ramps and trying to hit these physical targets. Instead, you were firing into a flat, projected alien sprites. It took away all the charm that was there, and that was the reason it failed. There's some fascinating documentary called Tilt that documents that whole story.
Yeah, and so people never really actually lost interest in pinball. It's more that they just forgot about it. And we've kind of discovered recently, we got crazy over the Doctor Who one, and we started really getting into pinball and playing it every day, and we discovered that they're still really enjoyable and amazing. And they just don't really have a place because you can't buy a pinball machine, they're too expensive. Not many people have them at home. But we're going to end on a sort of happy-ish note, aren't we? There's we've created a bit of a pinball pub crawl. There's various ones. This is the North London one. This is Holloway Road, kind of down to Angel through to Liverpool Street. I'll talk you through. You're going to start off in the Big Red. There's like a Guns N' Roses pinball machine, isn't there? In there.
Big Red, it starts with loads of atmosphere at the Big Red, which is an awesome rock bar, and then gets worse as you go south.
Yeah, there's an AC/DC one, that's the music pinball. You walk down Holloway Road, you get to the Bailey, there's a Sopranos pinball machine that's calibrated slightly wrongly, which means that if you flip it at the right moment, you can smash the ball against the glass at the top, and actually kind of creates a bit of a side quest for us, doesn't it?
One day you'll get it.
Never quite did it. And you can see in that road, Hope and Anchor, there's a big buck hunter do things, and it's all really great. And you get to the last place on the pub crawl, which is probably the best place in London.
Yeah, just for pinball, not for much else. It's full of bankers. But in the corner, they have 5 or 6 pinball machines constantly on rotation. Highly recommended if you're in town, going there and seeing it. They have some awesome ones. They have these incredible mods that have been done to some of the original ones where they give them colour dot matrix displays, which is incredible, honestly. It's not just yellow, there's colour. I think 10 colours. And that's it. Thanks so much.
We'd like people to join us on our pinball pub crawl, so please get in touch.
Yeah, we'll tweet when we're going to do this stuff, and if anyone's around London wants to come play pinball with us and pretend we know what we're talking about, please come along.
Thank you both.